idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We have our first season preview pod for you today. We're going to be doing team-by-team breakdowns of rosters and picks and basically see where everybody's at. We're going to be using our favorite website, Dynasty Daddy, and we're going to be grouping the league into thirds here. We're going to do the bottom four projected playoff teams, again, according to Dynasty Daddy. These are not our projections.
You mean the bottom four unlikely to make the playoffs?
Yeah. Did I phrase that? Did I not say that?
You said bottom four playoff teams.
Oh, yeah, there you go. The least likely. So me and the other three bums who aren't going to make the playoffs is basically what we're doing today.
Hey, we got a long way to go before the season starts, but according to current projections, yes, these are the bottom four rosters.
So of these bottom four teams, I have the highest percentage chance to make the playoffs at a solid 8%. So
right, it's not zero.
That is not zero, but it's less than 1 in every 10 times I am making the playoffs. Which feels right. My roster is not strong, so I don't think that's an inaccurate ranking.
Yeah, still a lot of changes that are going to happen here over the next month until the season starts. But as of right now, yeah, these four teams are going to be long shots.
Well, we are covering today. I'll say the teams. We're covering Mr. Good News, Benign Rug, GeorgiaMike, and myself. Mr. Good News and myself do have the number 1 and number 2 amount of draft capital as ranked by Dynasty Daddy. So it's always possible that if somebody gets a little bit lucky early on, they emulate Flea's model from last year and dump all those picks and buy players and try to turn it around quickly. But I don't think that's entirely as likely this season.
Yeah, I doubt that's the plan, but you never know. Things can change quickly in the NFL and in Dynasty fantasy football. But yeah, at least if you're at the bottom of the of the projected standings, at least you got hope for the future with all those picks. And it does give you the flexibility to turn it from a bottom dweller to a competitor, as we saw just last year.
Exactly. We're going to start by going over Mr. Good News' roster. Dynasty Daddy has him at a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs, a projected record of 6-22, and ranks him as the 11th overall roster and 12th in terms of starters. So
yeah,
not
that's
great.
Number 12 with a bullet. There's not a whole lot to talk about as far as impacts for this year on this roster. But we'll go ahead and go through the position groups. He certainly did a good job of tearing it down to the studs. Yeah. He has a lot of draft capital and not a lot of points.
Exactly. So his overall rank is 11, but his starter, QB, and running back ranked are 12th, and the wide receiver and tight end room are both 11th. Draft capital, he's number 1. So he
not shocking.
He understood the assignment, as it said. He got rid of everything that he could get rid of, and he sold at the end of last year, but he ran into a problem similar to what I ran into, was that all of the 24 capital had already been gobbled up by Rug and GeorgiaMike, basically, and he ended up getting a lot of 25 and 26 capital, which is also what I ended up doing, 25 capital.
Right. How many picks does he have in 25 and 26 now?
So in 2025, he has 13 total picks, and in 2026, he has 15 total picks.
And so about 3 times the normal allotment.
So he can basically fill out an entirely new roster exclusively with picks over the next 2 years,
which you'll have to do.
Pretty much.
There's not a lot on this roster that's expected to still be there in 2026. So he's going to need those picks.
Exactly. And then he can wiggle that around a little bit, and obviously you can, trade down or trade up, and that'll accumulate more impact picks or more bites at the apple, one way or the other. He's probably not going to stick and make all 28 of those picks. Obviously, you're going to want to move up and down the draft And the sheer number of picks he has gives him the ability to do that and to jump up a couple spots and get a player in the third round if he wants to without worrying about giving up an extra fourth round pick.
And based on the trade offers that I've been receiving from him, I'm sure he's not going to rest on his laurels. He's still out there trying to get more picks and add to his treasure trove even further. So we may see that number pumped up a little bit throughout the season.
I'm sure he'll be very active both on the waiver wire and on the trade front during the year.
Yeah, with a roster like this, you need to be hyperactive, especially on waivers throughout the season.
Yeah, any opportunity to add that little incremental value increase is what he needs to do. And then we've seen him doing it already, so I'm sure it won't, like you said, I'm sure he won't, as you said, rest on his laurels. He'll keep going. But let's look at a few of the actual players on the roster. You can't empty your roster. Even when you strip all the value that you can, you're still going to end up with a few players that are either in the margins or that you couldn't find a dance partner to acquire or whatever. But the one, bright spot on his roster is he's still got Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. Trevor Lawrence just got his new contract and he's not going anywhere, and he's a solid fantasy option.
Yep, it's nice to have that quarterback anchor at least when there's not much else to be excited about on the roster.
Right, and he's got two. He's got Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, you might want to tie him to an anchor and drop him into the ocean.
The other positions of note on his team are fairly lacking. As we said, the position rank for pretty much everything is either 11 or 12. But he's got a few rookies. Like he drafted Keon Coleman, the wide receiver for Buffalo, who is one of the higher drafted wide receivers out of that first tier. So I'm sure he's hopeful for that. Jermaine Burton's gotten a decent amount of hype, both pre and post draft. So he's got a few young guys that are at least bright spots and potential going forward.
Yeah, he's got a lot of guys with upward mobility in the value department, right? He's got Jermaine Burton, who could step in immediately into 3 receiver sets or potentially replace one of the outside receivers if Higgins departs next year as expected. He's got Roman Wilson, who could quickly climb the depth chart in Pittsburgh, and there's not a lot behind George Pickens.
Yeah.
He's got Johnny Wilson, who's already mixing in with the ones. Not that the third receiver in Philly has done much recently, but the fact that he's out there as a 6th-round rookie gives him a shot to become more valuable over time.
Excuse me. He picked up Smith there also in Philly, so he's got a couple bites at the apple there.
He added a couple of depth running back pieces. Bucky Irvin has a shot to be the handcuff in Tampa Bay. Royce Freeman's got a shot to be into the rotation in Dallas. DeMercado's got a chance to be in the rotation in Arizona. He's got a bunch of bodies that, if any of them pop into value, he'll have a chance to sell them.
Yep. And DeMercado, like you said, had a very brief moment last year where everyone was very excited about him. I think in their bye week. And then he came out and did basically nothing after that.
Well, I mean, you're talking about an undrafted free agent who was basically a backup in college. But, he's a good pass blocker. There's a chance that he could be out there ahead of Troy Benson in certain sets. You never know. And any running back on a 53 has a chance to come into value at some point during the season.
Very
Just collect these bodies. They're not scoring any points when they're not playing, so it's not like you're hurting his chances of not scoring points. And if they do come into value, then you flip them.
So the interesting thing you said about his chances of not scoring points, we should mention that Mr. Good News has 2 first round picks next year in 2025, but neither one of them are his own pick. He's got Flea's pick and JMC's pick. So he's stripped it down here essentially a year early because he was still trying to compete last year and used his 25 capital in season, and then just a lot of bad luck. He got very unlucky. It wasn't necessarily a poor decision to buy in, but just the timing didn't go the way the way he had hoped. And so he's basically not competing this year, but also doesn't have his own pick. So I don't think he's going to necessarily look to unload any points immediately because he's not going to care if he doesn't finish dead last.
Right. I was not going to bring up that unfortunate incident, considering that you are the direct beneficiary of
I
this team
feel
not
I feel like
scoring
I have
points.
to mention it, but I'm also like trying not to be too happy about it. I don't want to be an asshole.
It happens. Sometimes you make trades and they backfire. At the time, it was a defensible move. It
was.
obviously looks much worse now a year later, but he made the decision to tear it down, even not owning his own first, which is not an easy decision to make, but it was a necessary one. Otherwise, he would have just been stuck spiraling further down and digging himself into a bigger hole. At least now he's got a path forward coming out of after this season. It's going to be a rough year for his team, and he knows that. But he did set himself up to improve quickly after that, at least.
Yep. And even without his own first round pick, 2 first round picks, 2 second round picks, 3 third round picks, he's got quality capital, and I'm sure he'll, like we said, expand on that as we go on.
Yeah, he's got quality and quantity.
Yeah.
And I think 2026 is really where he's looking into for his window. So even the 2025 picks, we may not see him make a lot. He didn't make many this year. The picks he did acquire in 24, he kind of picked his spots and moved stuff around as best he could, buying into future years as well, which I think was the right decision.
I would say so. So the 26 capital, if you go look at it, it's kind of hilarious to read because he has his own first through fifth, he has Biggs first through fifth, and he has Flea's first through fifth. He has 15 picks, but it's not like a mishmash. He just has all his picks on all of both of their picks. It's hilarious to look at.
15 picks from 3 teams.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll add more as we go, as the contenders try to shore up the rosters in season and everything. But it's just, as of right now, it's just the exact same thing 5 times.
Well, we know what teams he'll be rooting against in 2025.
Yeah, that's you're not wrong.
And again, his tight end room kind of follows the same path we've looked at his other spot. These are kind of late round guys that he took shots on, guys that have potential for upward mobility and value. These are the kind of lottery tickets you just hope 1 or 2 of these guys throughout the roster can hit into real value. Just stash as many as you can. When you got basically an entire roster of empty spots, you can take a lot of lottery tickets.
And he did what no one else in the league has managed to do, which was to pry Davis Allen away from you.
That's right. I did trade him Davis Allen. That was one of the many draft day trades that he executed.
Oh, I should mention the Dynasty Daddy does it give everyone a label as what tier you're in, and Mr. Good News is in the trust the process tier. So shout out Philly.
Of course, the Philly guy would be trust the process.
Yeah.
You want to define what they
if I remembered
they call
exactly
trust the
what it was or
process?
had thought to check, then yes.
Per Dynasty Daddy, trust the process is the tier when the rebuilding tier bucket only has 1 team, meaning this team's starter value is so much lower than the rest of the league that the bucket sort algorithm determined the rest of the league is closer to each other than that team. This team is missing many pieces and most likely aiming for the first pick next year.
There you
Per
go.
Dynasty Daddy.
All right. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, it's enough of looking at that roster. Sorry, Mr. Good News. We'll see you in 2026.
Yeah. The number 11 ranked team, or number 11 percentage chance to make the playoff team, I should say, is Benign Ruggs team with a projected record of 7-21 in the fraud category. Ruggs' overall rank is 9 and his starter rank is 11. This is another team that stripped down and went pretty bare bones, but he's a year ahead of, or maybe even 2 years ahead of where Mr. Good News is in the process, in that he's got a lot of rookies on this roster.
Yeah, he had a very impactful draft. He took potential superstars all over the draft board. So he's got a very exciting team that may not be competitive this year, but I mean, if things break right, he may be in that surprise playoff range.
Exactly.
He certainly has the pieces.
And that's what the fraud category basically means there. Did you want to read that definition before we get into his roster or no?
Dynasty Daddy defines fraud as a middling tier most likely won't make the playoffs. They could be exiting a rebuild or tailing off from a contender run. So for him, he's on that potentially exiting a rebuild. He's on the upswing, hopefully.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those pieces that he's exiting with. He's got a solid QB room, according to Dynasty Daddy, the number 5 QB room, headlined by 2 rookies, Jaden Daniels and Drake May. He's also got second-year Bryce Young, and then some, Aiden O'Connell has a chance to start as well. So, I mean, he's got a lot of options there that could pan out.
He's certainly got youth on his side. So right now they hold a lot of dynasty value. But again, they have to actually perform to maintain that value, like we saw with Bryce Young, unfortunately, last year.
Yeah, he
came in with a lot of hype and was very disappointing. But he managed to pick up another couple of top 5 picks this year in Jaden Daniels and Drake May. So things could be looking up. There's a good chance that by this time next year, he's got one of the best quarterback rooms in the entire league, if things go right.
He's already ranked above average, and 2 of his top 3 haven't taken an NFL snap yet. And we don't know if Drake May is even going to start the year. A lot of people expect Jacoby Brissett to start the year, so we might not even see May until halfway through the season.
Right, and a lot of that is dynasty value, not projected points this year. I would expect this would not be a room that we are projecting to score a lot of fantasy points this season. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they do carry a above average amount of value just based on the youth and the potential upside where they were drafted. And then his running back room is the opposite. It looks like you would expect a team coming out of a rebuild to look. He's got basically nothing.
How dare you speak that way about Jamal Williams?
Deneric Prince, who has a chance at being in a role in Kansas City right now. He's currently running with the 2s. It's only Clyde Edwards-Helaire that he needs to beat out. It's not like it's not like it's a huge roadblock for him to get into some value this year.
It's a first-round pick.
Yeah. I bet they'd like to have that pick back. Imagine how good that team would be if they stopped burning first-round picks.
It's kind of impressive, to be honest.
They just can't get those early picks. Between receivers and running backs and these skill guys, they keep trying to shoehorn in here. Just is not working out.
It does remind me of like some of those Patriots teams that we saw where like
they could not draft a receiver.
No, they or a cornerback for years. Like they're drafting these guys at the top of the draft, and every year they're doing it, and those guys just fail, and somehow the team wins 13 games and makes the AFC title game every year anyways. And you're just kind of like, couldn't you just maybe do better in the first round and make this a lot easier?
When you got the best player in the league quarterbacking your team, gives you a lot of cushion on your other personnel moves.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It would tend to make things easier. Yeah, so his running back rank is 11, which is only 11th because Mr. Good News has a team as well.
Right.
So there's nothing there to discuss. We'll see if any of those guys falls into value through injury. And
my guess is, if any of these guys get a moment in the sun, he'll be quick to trade them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what I would be doing in his spot. I don't think any of these guys are long-term plans for him.
No, and I don't think they're in the long-term plans for anyone, even if they get work. Although I was going to say there's already talk about Jamal Williams going back to being the number 2 in New Orleans, which would be a little strange.
That's bad news for Kendre Miller.
Yeah, that's damning right there for him. Let's move on to that wide receiver room.
Yeah, now this is an exciting room. This is a wide receiver room that I would like to have.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Williams, Rondale Moore, Cedric Tillman. What's not to love? Oh, sorry, I was reading halfway down. Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., Jordan Addison, Christian Watson, Jalen Polk, Dontavian Wicks. There's a lot of rookie and second year value right there. Right. Oh, the Watson is Watson going into his 3rd year?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So early value there, but still, I mean, Harrison's the big name.
Yeah, he's got a very high upside wide receiver room filled with guys that the market really likes, guys that were highly drafted, guys that hold a lot of dynasty value. I don't know how many fantasy points we're going to project from this room this year, but they certainly hold a lot of dynasty value, which is good for him going forward.
They hold a lot of dynasty value, and there's a lot of them. Like half his roster is wide receivers, which adds value to that ranking at number 3, even though some of them, you've got guys like Mike Williams who isn't likely to do much this year or coming off injury, who still holds a lot of value, or guys like at the bottom, Paris Campbell and Tim Patrick, who still have some value at some point, but probably aren't gonna do a whole heck of a lot for his roster.
Yeah, I count 21 rostered receivers.
Yeah, there's a lot. I was not kidding.
There's a lot of bodies here, but it's a best ball, depth plays, so it's always good to have extra contributors. Mm-hmm. And even if it's guys like vets like Jacoby Myers, Mike Williams, Rondell Moore, guys that could potentially have value this year to somebody else, if he wants to trade him and pick up more draft capital, continue adding to his young core. All right, let's talk about this tight end room.
Got some more rookies to talk about. It's the same story as the wide receiver room. We got a decent number of guys, for a tight end room anyways. The top of the list is Jatavian Sanders and Theo Johnson, who, we don't really know anything about at this point.
Well, we do know they have opportunities to be contributors right off the bat. Both are entering tight end rooms that are pretty barren, with Darren Waller retiring for the Giants and Carolina not having any tight ends for the last 10 years. How long has it been since Greg Olsen?
I don't know. He's been in the booth for like 5 years, so it's at least 5. I don't know exactly.
Both have opportunities. And then you have Hunter Henry, the old reliable vet, who put up a pretty decent year last year.
He was the number 1 tight end like the first 2 weeks of the season last year, wasn't he?
Was indeed.
You have other guys like Eric All, who's also, an unknown, but has an opportunity. There's not a lot on that depth chart either.
Yep. Jeremy Rucker fall into the number 2 role behind Conklin this year, and a chance to push him.
It's true. And we've seen Rodgers just have years where all of a sudden the tight end catches, 10 touchdowns or whatever, and the backup catches another 5. So it's quite possible that he'll have a few flash weeks.
Before he went out with a concussion at the end of the year, he was cutting into Conklin's workload to where it was basically a 50-50 split. So if he can continue to grow and push that even further, there's a good chance that he could get some value out of this tight end room.
Yeah, I've actually seen Ruckert available in a few other leagues, and I'm fairly certain I picked him up in a couple of different spots because, again, only one guy in front of him, and it's Conklin. It's not like it's a tough depth chart mountain to climb there.
Yep, and he's a good blocker, so he's going to be able to stay on the field for basically all downs.
Yeah, and that offensive line will need that help.
And in this league where it's crazy tight end premium plus 2 starting tight ends every week, you need anybody with a pulse. Anybody who's getting any snaps at tight end is valuable. So looking at Ruggs' roster, I mean, we're not really expecting him to push for a playoff spot this year unless all of these rookies hit at unforeseen levels of production for rookies. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely. It's more likely that he's a year away. He's got his normal allotment of capital. I think he's missing a second round, but he's got a couple of extra fourths next year and got all of his 26 picks. So he'll have a chance to continue adding pieces next year and maybe start actually pushing for a playoff berth here very shortly.
That sounds about right to me.
Although he's lumped in at the bottom with Mr. Good News, I think his arrow is a lot closer to pointing upwards.
I would say that's right. And I mean, he's at the bottom, but he's not in that same tier. I mean, we see the difference between fraud and trust the process there. So,
yep.
He just has to hope he drafted the right guys and continue drafting well.
He definitely belongs in a tier with the other 2 teams that we're going to talk about, your team included. You 3 are kind of in the same bucket where you did the tear down, you're starting to come out the other side, and will be competitive sooner rather than later. Potentially even this year if everything breaks right.
It is sort of impressive because his team last year, along with GeorgiaMike's team, were at the level that we just discussed that Mr. Good News is at now. They both were basically 0-win teams that only got the win when they win against each other. Right? There was no shining light on either of those rosters. You could see all these guys, almost all of them were either rookies this year or second-year guys. Like, this is not an old team.
It's amazing what happens when you have a crazy deep draft and you have a lot of draft picks. There were a couple teams that basically controlled the entire first round and most of the second round. So all of the impact players in a very deep draft ended up consolidated on a couple of rosters. That's a way to turn your team around very quickly. Well, assuming these rookies actually deliver on the promise.
All right. Well, speaking of those teams that controlled the first round, let's go take a look at the other one. GeorgiaMike is our next team that we're going to be discussing. He's got a 4% chance to make the playoffs, so we're above that less than 1% chance there. His starter rank is number 10. He's listed in the frisky tier. Give us that frisky definition.
Sure. Per Dynasty Daddy, frisky is the second highest bucket, and it holds the fringe playoff teams. These teams could be considered wildcard teams or teams that barely missed the playoffs.
So slightly above fraud, but still probably not a true contender, which we already kind of would imagine it. A 4% chance to make the playoffs is not really a contender.
Right. He's in this similar bucket to Benign Rug, maybe with a little bit better overall projections for this year. He's pretty rookie heavy, but not completely rookie heavy. He has some second and third year guys that we kind of know what we're going to get from them. So we'll go through his roster now.
So we'll start at the QB room. He's the number 9 rank on the QB scale there. This one's real simple. He drafted Caleb Williams and he drafted JJ McCarthy. And he's got a few backups hanging around.
That's the room. He had no quarterbacks last year, which was pretty much by design. He was trying to get the first overall pick, and he succeeded and got Caleb Williams.
Dare you not remember that he had Zach Wilson all year?
Exactly. He had no quarterbacks. I think Zach Wilson probably scored negative points.
It's close.
So he does still have Zach Wilson, who has not
unfortunately
he has not been ruled out of the starting job in Denver yet.
Let me allow me to break that news now if I haven't already. Zach Wilson will not be the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos in 2024-25. You can take that to the bank.
I will be surprised if he makes the roster. But that was his best quarterback last year. This year's a different story. Now he's got two guys that were drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft. So he's certainly got upside and promise, and hopefully he's got his quarterback slots taken care of for the next few years.
Yeah, and obviously Caleb Williams was the number 1 overall pick and is a little bit more exciting than basically anyone else.
Hey, don't tell that to Big. He's very excited for JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Some people really like JJ McCarthy.
Again, I don't dislike McCarthy or anything, but he's not anywhere near that range to me.
Right. He's not Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is being drafted on the fringes of the first round in startups. So there's quite a big gap there. And that's the reason that Caleb went 101 in the rookie draft and went 101 in most rookie drafts and went 101 in the NFL drafts. He's a very good prospect where he's going to walk into a good situation, better situation than Justin Fields had the whole time he was there. Nice for the Bears to finally build around their quarterback.
Tough luck for Justin Fields.
I mean, also Justin Fields isn't very good, but they could have probably done more to help him.
but doesn't that mean that even more so you need to surround him with talent like they've done with Caleb?
Right.
Like I get it, but tough luck.
When he took this roster over, we knew it was going to be a multi-year rebuild, and this may be the last year of his rebuild. It's possible that if the guys hit and he can add some more contributors next year, we are looking at a playoff team next year. There is a possibility that's the path he's on right now.
Yep. All right, so we're gonna slide on over to this running back room. Running back rank of number 9. There's not a lot going on here. We've got 3 guys at the top who are either all backups or Gus Edwards. So Charbonnet, Marshawn Lloyd, and Gus Edwards. Charbonnet obviously backing up Walker in Seattle. Lloyd in an unknown role thus far, rookie coming in Green Bay, and Gus in a similar unknown role in that new Chargers offense, but speculated to be the starter. This looks like a running back room I would expect to see you coming into the season with.
It does have Trey Sermon on the roster, so
Wasn't going to mention that right now. Wasn't gonna. He's also got Rashad Penny, who just retired. So let's, GeorgiaMike, let's get a move on. Make some drops here.
Trey Sermon looks like the early favorite to be the Jonathan Taylor handcuff, which is a very profitable role last year for Zach Moss. So don't underestimate Trey Sermon.
Feel perfectly comfortable underestimating Trey Sermon.
But yeah, this is, if you're trying to be a competitive team, this is obviously an underwhelming running back room. You got a lot of good supporting pieces here, but nothing really that's going to carry you to a lot of wins. And it's possible that a guy like Gus Edwards, as soon as he starts playing, if he's the primary back in a run-heavy offense, he'll be able to flip him and get some value out of him for a guy that he got for not much last year. The tail end of last year, we questioned that purchase for a non-playoff team, but there's a good chance that he'll be able to increase in value based on the landing spot and the projected role. It may end up being a very smart decision.
A running back to flip to, I don't know, someone who really likes old busted running backs. You know.
Guilty.
It's always good to have those running backs that you can sell in season, because there's going to be people who have those draft picks burning a hole in their pocket, essentially.
Yep. That's usually what happens. There's never enough running backs to go around. Contenders are always trying to buy running backs, no matter how many guys you have on your depth chart. They're always hurt. So there's always guys that emerge, and it gives some of these non-contending teams paths to get some future value.
Let's move over to the wide receiver room.
Another exciting receiver room.
This is a fun one. The headliners: Drake London, Rome Odunze, Michael Pittman, Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Jaden Reed, Jamison Williams, Troy Franklin, and Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, you can leave that last one off.
You know,
no one's excited for Quentin Johnston anymore.
I was going to stop after Reed, and I wasn't sure whether I should include Williams, Franklin, and Johnston or not, but they're all still talked about in that exciting young player bucket still, so I kind of felt like I should. But, you know, Franklin, I really just wanted to throw in because he's my guy.
At this point, I'd rather have Yoshevich than Quentin Johnston.
Oh, that's tough. I would take QJ over Yoshevich.
I think Yoshevich has a better chance of being in 3 receiver sets. I don't think it's going to happen for QJ.
I don't know about this year. I mean, I think Burton's already projected to be that guy, isn't he?
I would expect Yoshevich to at least get the first crack at it, but we'll see. Sure. I think Burton's going to end up being the backup for the 2 outside receiver spots.
That was a lot like what they had. Was it Irving? Who was the other guy they had?
Irwin.
Not Irving. Yeah, I had him on my roster and I traded him. I should know this. Anyway,
Trenton Irwin. Yeah. There's a chance that Burton kind of fills that role, and
so what's
Yoshevich is kind of the slot guy taking over for Boyd, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Preseason hasn't really started yet.
Enough about the Bengals number 3 wide receiver. Let's talk about the actual exciting players here. My favorite draft pick in our draft was when GeorgiaMike took Rome Odunze to pair with Caleb. I love that stack. And I see that Drake London is technically ranked higher than Rome Odunze here, but I don't care. I don't care.
People are finally expecting Drake London to pay off his lofty expectations now in his 3rd season.
It's not a bet I would be making, to be honest.
It's been some disappointing for fantasy results the first few years, but it hasn't quieted the hype. It's
No,
been
it hasn't.
pretty much constant. He hasn't really slipped in value very much since he was drafted,
I,
despite
I don't know if he slipped at all
the
because
poor results.
Rome is Rome is below him, and Rome obviously hasn't lost any value since he was drafted. Like,
Yep.
I mean, he's got the oldest guy of these noteworthy guys here is Michael Pittman, who just got his second contract there, and he's by no means old. The is running wide receiver room here. Average age is 23, so this is this is the young group.
Yeah, he's got a good mix. A lot of upside here. A lot of rookies, a lot of second year guys, a lot of third year guys. He's got a good mix. This is the kind of room that you're looking for, especially in a deep best ball. He's got a lot of potential contributors.
Yeah, I mean, and former number one draft pick N'Keal Harry to anchor it at the bottom there.
Now tight end. He might actually be valuable if he gets tight end snaps in this league, at least.
Why am I so rude, though, is the real question here.
I mean, there's plenty of guys you could have picked on. Terrence Marshall, Keishon Butte.
Sure, yeah, that's true. I actually like a couple of these guys, like Parker Washington, Washington. I didn't realize that both of those guys named Washington before I was halfway through speaking that there.
Just really like Washington.
Yep.
It's a
George.
It's a good. This
Washington.
this receiver room is a competitive receiver room. This is a playoff receiving room. Maybe a little young, but this is a potentially playoff receiving room. He doesn't really have it at running back or probably not quarterback yet, but this receiving room is set up to be a playoff team.
Yeah, and they're all young, so that 2 years from now, this receiver room should look very, very similar at the top.
Yeah, he'll have the entire room will be in its prime, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my concerns is, he's got Odunze, McConkey, and Worthy, all rookies, all highly drafted. And the chances of all three of them hitting are low, but I mean, stranger things have happened.
Yep. That's the problem with relying on too many rookies, especially when we're looking at it kind of a redraft perspective this year. There's a chance that some of these guys don't really contribute much at all as far as scoring points. But what he's looking for is guys that have a chance to hold their value, guys that can kind of grow into that role to when he is looking at be a true competitive team next year and the year after. These are guys that will still be in the plan.
That sounds right. All right, let's go to his tight end room. This is a similar rank. His tight end room is ranked number 5, which is, I think, more based on depth than top end talent.
He's got a bunch of names, very young room again, kind of following the theme of this roster, and they're all kind of first, second, third year guys.
Yeah, Ben Sinnott, the rookie coming in a good position, not a lot of competition there, could theoretically produce right from the beginning. Michael Mayer coming into a second year, had a really good first year, but now got some competition.
Yeah, we'll see what happens between him and Bowers. There's still a path of value if they run enough two tight end sets, which I wouldn't rule out the possibility. I mean, we're talking about a coach who wants to have a power running team, and Meyer's a much better blocker. He's going to be the inline guy. We've seen teams that have been able to maintain 2 fantasy relevant tight ends. We don't have to go back that far. We were talking about the Patriot heyday earlier. That was a team that used this very successfully with a big inline tight end. And then,
I feel like the entire NFL has been chasing that since the Patriots did it.
The problem is you have to have the personnel. There's not that many tight ends in the world that can do that.
Really thought you were about to say there's not a lot of Aaron Hernandez. I was going to be like, that's a good thing.
That's for the best.
Did I ever tell you that I met him?
I'm sorry. I'm glad you're still here.
Thanks. No, we had gone to the my in-laws are season ticket holders, so we were at like the preseason, like just open to season ticket holders, like open practice, and their seats for that particular practice were like for front row seats, like literally front row in the end zone there. And we're hanging out, and the kid sitting next to us was Aaron Hernandez's neighbor. So halfway through the practice, Hernandez comes over and starts like shaking hands and taking selfies with everybody. And he chatted with his neighbor and consequently us for like 10 minutes in the middle of practice.
Well, just be glad you didn't run into him in a nightclub in Providence.
Very much glad, yes.
Practice seems like a better place to meet him.
Oh, much better. Yeah. Well, that was when he was a rookie too. That was his rookie year. So
Oh, that was before the murdering. All right.
actually, I don't know. There was rumors of things when he was in Florida, so it may have been
fair point.
We can ask the Pouncies, but let's move on.
Not much to talk about in the draft picks. He's got all of his picks for the next 2 years. No extra picks.
Yeah. And so his draft capital rank is 5, which means that at least one person has traded away their own picks, which in this league we know is way more than one person.
Yeah, exactly. Just having your own picks kind of puts you right in the middle.
Yeah. Our next team is my team. 8% chance to make the playoffs, projected 11-17 record, and an overall rank of number 3, which is a fairly significant departure from the rest of the group that we've discussed today in terms of overall rank.
Yeah, your team carries a lot of fantasy value, maybe not a lot of projected points outside of a handful of players, but you do have a lot of value. I think a lot of that is tied up in draft picks as well. You have the combination where we've seen Mr. Good News has all his value in picks, and then the last 2 teams had a small amount of value in picks, just kind of their own picks, and then mostly in young players. And you kind of have that young players and a ton of draft capital, which pushes you to the top of this tier. But you're probably going to end up similarly record-wise. I wouldn't expect a ton of wins or any of these teams to really push for a playoff spot. But you do carry a lot more fantasy value, which is good for you going forward.
That sounds accurate to me.
Gives you more opportunity to become a competitive team. The more value you have on your roster, the more things you can do.
All right. So let's go over that roster. We'll start, same as everybody else, with that quarterback position.
Yeah, this is one that's had a complete facelift since last season.
So my quarterback rank is 1. Basically, since the beginning of this league, my quarterback rank, I think the lowest I've ever been is like 3.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick Mahomes. Everyone else has been different.
Much.
Patrick Mahomes has been a constant.
Yep. So I've got Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, and all right, that's enough. Let's go home. And a couple rookies coming in, Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, and then a bunch of backups. You and I just made a trade between our 2 teams where I sent out Anthony Richardson and you sent back Justin Herbert.
Good old-fashioned challenge trade. QB for QB.
Well, I mean, we can't forget about Cager, but
right, Lawrence Cager. Yeah,
suppose we could probably forget about it.
If this wasn't a 2 tight end heavy premium, we could definitely forget about him. But he's a tight
literally
end
not even listed on my tight end page here.
with a pulse. There is a chance that he has some value at some point this year.
He's not on Keep Trade Cut, so he does not actually get listed on Dynasty Daddy's page.
Yeah, not yet. He is arguably the best receiving tight end on that roster. We've seen him in that role. We've seen him in that role a few times in the last couple of years.
Daniel Bellinger, like, not existent to you?
Not as a receiver, no. I do not consider him a
He's
receiving
a better
threat.
receiver than Cager. That is not. Come on. We're not doing that.
I don't believe that. But this is not what people came.
Neither one of them are good wide receivers.
They want to talk about
This is exactly
Herbert
why the people
and
are here.
Richardson. No one cares about Lawrence Cager.
No.
Nobody knows who he is except for us.
I'm doing a poll. As soon as we post this, I'm doing a poll.
Do you know who Lawrence
the Herbert
Cager is?
Richardson or the Cager Bellinger? No, we're putting a poll up.
All right, let's give the people what they want then. Lawrence Cager. Listen, I saw Bellinger play at San Diego State. Okay, he's not a receiving threat. He may have been force-fed targets because they have no receivers, but Cager is the one that really took over that receiving role when given the opportunity.
I don't think he's taken over anything. I mean, I'm going to roster him. Don't get me wrong.
I'm going to use it very loosely, taking over, okay? That's in the loosest definition possible.
All right, so I know why I made the Herbert for Richardson swap. I want to hear why you made that swap.
Well, for me, it was upside. I don't think that Justin Herbert has a chance to be the number 1 overall quarterback this year. I think that he's in a rough team situation. They have minimal receiving threats. They let go a lot of key veteran pieces. They're clearly rebuilding the team in Jim Harbaugh's image, which at some point in the future will probably lead to a much more efficient Justin Herbert and make him a very good fantasy option. But I don't expect it to be this year, especially now that we know he's dealing with a plantar fasciitis tear, which is not going to keep him out, but will probably limit him for the entire season. It's not really what I'm looking for as a team that's trying to win now. Obviously, Herbert's a much safer option. We saw Richardson's potential upside last year. He was quarterback one in pretty much every game that he finished. We also saw the downside. He didn't finish very many games. We still have a lot of questions on what he can do as a passer, but I took a shot on upside. Simple as that.
Fair enough. Yeah. So from my end of things, I looked at it and I do love Richardson. I love the potential. As you said, he basically finished number one in all the games that he played, or was on pace to finish number one in all the games he played
Right.
and then left.
Just weren't enough of them.
But Herbert's, was he 25, 26 at most?
Herbert
26,
is
I think.
Herbert is a good player. He's arguably my favorite player.
Yeah. To
This trade hurt me to make. Okay, it took me a long time to pry him from Mr. Goodnews's cold dead fingers, only to have him immediately get hurt, and then for me to trade him before he ever actually even helped my team. This was not an easy trigger to pull.
Yeah. So I looked at it and I said, I know Mahomes is going to have big boom games. Mahomes is 28 years old, going to be 29, I think, in the season. But between Mahomes and Herbert, as long as this league is not going anywhere, I could probably roll those two out there for the next 10 years and have a competitive quarterback room with literally nothing else happening.
It's definitely a much safer place to park your value when you're not really trying to win this year. You know that come hell or high water, Justin Herbert's going to be around the same spot value-wise as he is right now. You know, he's not going to lose a ton of value. He's already kind of dropped below where he probably should be valued based on a lot of the team context that people are using against him.
Yeah.
Richardson is a real wild card. He could be quarterback one, or he could be Justin Fields and a backup in a year or two. There's a wide range of outcomes with these kind of, raw players. He didn't have a lot of snaps in college. He didn't make it through very many snaps last year in the NFL. So if you're going to stay in the same tier, but with a much safer guy, it makes a lot of sense when you have a team constructed the way you have.
And maybe I'm a little bit burned because of the way Trey Lance played out. But Richardson did scare the bejesus out of me. I mean, he's one of the few guys who I would, put that could make that jump into the Mahomes or Allen level. And he's not far off that value wise now. Like I'm sure Herbert wasn't the only quarterback I could have basically traded for straight up there, but I don't know. I like Herbert.
We know for sure that Justin Herbert is a much better real life NFL quarterback than Anthony Richardson. It's not even a question.
It's a safer place to park the value, and I'm not sad about it.
Yeah. Yep. It makes sense for you to make this based on the way your team is constructed. And it made sense for me to try to improve the ceiling of my team the way that my roster is constructed. So
swing for the fences there. I mean, you've got Goff and Tua. Not that we need to get deep into your roster right now, but you've got Goff and Tua to give you a baseline at the quarterback position already. And you didn't have Herbert for your title run last year, and you still won the title. So, even if, the same thing happens with Richardson and he gets hurt again, he's not there or not available to your roster, you still know that you can get by with those other guys, and there will be other quarterbacks available, guys that are not likely to have value through more than a year or two.
Yep. Bottom line was I wanted to win this year again, and I thought that was probably my best path, was to take a guy that could potentially have a quarterback one overall ceiling.
All right, so the other two quarterbacks on my roster there, Penix and Nix are both rookies coming in. Bo Nix expected most likely to start the full year, and Penix expected to not play at all. So I guess wait and see on Penix and hope that Nix pans out.
Yep. This was the deepest quarterback class for Dynasty that we've ever seen. We've never seen this many quarterbacks go in the top 12 picks in the history of the NFL. So there was a lot of QB value to be had, and you ended up getting a couple guys late in the first round that in a normal class would have gone at the top of the first round in rookie drafts. So value is definitely there. There's a chance that you have a set quarterback room now forever if these guys all pan out. You may not have to make another quarterback pick in a rookie draft for a long time.
I was gonna say if they all pan out, you're not gonna see me do anything at quarterback for a decade.
Right.
But that was part of what I was looking at was, what's the percentage chance that Richardson plays out, and what's the percentage chance that Bo Nix plays out and Michael Penix plays out? Well, obviously aren't all three of them. It's the same thing that we just talked about with GeorgiaMike's wide receiver room. They're not all gonna hit.
Right.
So now I'm looking at if I go 50-50 on this and one of those two is good, great. I'm set.
Yep.
And the other thing is I didn't want to necessarily be forced to address quarterback in next year's draft. And, now with Mahomes and Herbert, I won't be forced to address it at any point, hopefully.
Put yourself in a very good quarterback position. There's a reason that you're ranked number 1 overall in the league with your QB room. You have a enviable room here with upside, depth, youth. You got pretty much everything you're looking for. Production. I mean, you've hit on every tier here. It's a good quarterback room. I'm tired of talking about it. Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's move on to this horrible running back room.
This awful running back room. I've been trying to trade the top 2 names here, J.K. Dobbins and Rico Dowdle, since the end of last year.
With all these guys, Dobbins too, it's going to take until the season starts and they start producing. If these guys are in real roles, then they'll have real value. All these fringe running backs are like this. We'll believe it when we see it. When they start producing, then people will want them and you'll be able to trade them.
Yeah.
Right now, nobody wants to give you anything of substance for these guys that could be in a real rotation or potentially even the number 1 back with Dobbins, or they could also not make the final roster.
Yep. I've got half a dozen guys who could. I'm still rostering Kareem Hunt, who's not on a team.
Right. But by week 1, he could be in a rotation.
Yeah. I'd really like to cut him, but also I feel like if I cut him, somebody else has got to add him.
Yeah. There's enough teams that have a lot of open roster spots. We've just looked at a few. Yeah. Guys like this will get snatched up because they could potentially return value at some point for you in a trade.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of rookies, Dylan Labe, Isaac Garendo, Sion Vaki, Jordan. Maybe some of them work their way into a role. Most likely they'll all end up on the cutting room floor by the end of the season, and we'll have a bunch of other backups in there.
Yeah, these late round guys, what you're looking for is a path. They got to make the roster, and then you have to pounce when they have value. There's a chance that injuries could force them into a role, and then they will have production as a result of that role. And then chances are they're not going to be long-term solutions for any of these teams based on the fact that they're late picks or undrafted. But that doesn't mean they can't be contributors for somebody who's trying to win. So it's good lottery tickets to have when you got a bunch of empty spots, basically.
Yep. All right. This room is awful. Let's move on. So the wide receiver room, rank of 9. Oh, I should have mentioned the running back was a rank of 8. And I don't think I said it earlier. This is the same tier of Dynasty Daddy tier as GeorgiaMike, as in Frisky. So the wide receiver room, rank of 9. There's like 2 guys to talk about here. I have Puka and I have JSN, and that's about it.
Yeah, Puka is doing a lot of the value carrying for this team, but
he's a third of the value of my wide receivers.
He had a historically good rookie season. It doesn't matter at this point where he was drafted. At this point, he was a wide receiver 1 for the entire season, the wide receiver 1 for parts of the season. You get a rookie season like that, one of the best ever. You're a good player.
Yep. So we'll see if he repeats, if he builds on what happens with Puka, but I'm excited to watch him again this year.
Yep, he's a cornerstone of your roster. He's a guy that you can build around.
Yep.
JSN, we'll see. He was drafted to be a guy like that. Wasn't super productive last year, but we kind of expected that based on the landing spot and the offense he was going in. It's going to be a new offense this year. And, Lockett's a year older. They did bring him back, but not a ton of guarantees, not enough to keep JSN out of the lineup if he pushes his way into 2 receiver sets. But we saw in Washington last year that they will run a lot of 3 receiver sets. He'll have a chance to be out there and do a lot more than what we saw in last year's offense.
Yeah, and I still really like the player. I'm very hopeful. Like you said, it's a new offensive coordinator coming in, new offense. We'll see how it all plays out. The rest of this room, not a whole lot talking about. Luke McCaffrey, I feel like I got a good draft day value on him. We'll see if he does anything. Darnell Mooney, new landing spot in Atlanta. We'll see if he does anything. The rest of these guys are just not worth talking about.
Yeah, some kind of flyers and fillers. These guys have value in best ball. Guys like Alec Pierce that are on the field. He mostly
running the league last year.
Mostly running wind sprints, but at some point, there's potentially Richardson can hit him with some of these deep shots. There's a chance for some spike weeks. It doesn't hurt to have him on the end of your roster in a best ball.
Third and Juwan?
No, Juwan may be on the field.
Juwan should have been Super Bowl MVP, Jennings.
Still to be seen what's going to happen with Ayuk at this point in the recording. He's still on the Niners.
He'll resign eventually, or get extended, not resign. He'll get his money.
We'll see. Still to be seen. Seems like the most likely scenario, but anything is possible.
Yeah, they'll
they'll
pay him, and then somebody will be moved or cut next year. That's what'll happen.
Yeah, Jennings is going to do what he does, even if he's out there.
Yep.
Super Bowl notwithstanding, he's not a huge offensive focal piece, even when he's out there. But, these are guys that are going to see snaps. So you never know.
Yep. All right. Let's go to the tight ends.
Yeah, tight ends is far more exciting.
So tight end rank of 3. We got Brock Bowers, Jake Ferguson, Pat Fryermuth, Isaiah Likely, and as we discussed previously, Daniel Bellinger.
Yeah, this is a good tight end room, especially in this league. You've got young, productive, highly drafted. Brock Bowers was your first pick this year in the rookie draft. And Brock Bowers is arguably the most productive, age-adjusted production college tight end to ever come out. If he can become a real difference maker, that buoys this position up to the top of the league. Ferguson was very productive last year, and he's potentially walking into an even bigger piece of the pie this year. They didn't do much to upgrade their wide receiver core outside of Lamb. And Fryermuth has a chance to bounce back if he can stay healthy. New offense that is tight end friendly. And again, a lack of really wide receiver depth behind
friendly
Pickett.
To some tight ends. Don't let Mel hear you say that one.
And Isaiah Likely, who's again has a chance to be one of the top receiving options, even as a backup tight end in Baltimore.
They were just. Did you see the report yesterday that was like Isaiah Likely may be the number 2 option?
It's not impossible. They could use him creatively. He can play a wide variety of roles, and he was very productive when Andrews went down. He had some big games down the stretch last year.
They really should be trying to do that 2 tight end thing. They should be trying to get him and Andrews on there at the same time.
Right. It just gives them more options in the run game and the pass game. It's not like they have a ton of receivers that you need to have on the field at all times. It's Zay Flowers, and maybe this is the year for Rashad Bateman.
Are we still doing the Bateman thing? Because
been holding our breath for many years now.
I'm out on the Bateman thing.
He's not on my roster anymore, so this will be the year that he finally produces.
Yeah. So, I've had offers for pretty much every single one of these tight ends.
Yes, because we're a tight end starved league.
Yeah.
Everyone needs tight ends, but there's no reason to move them unless you're getting a good return, because you need tight ends eventually, and these guys are all young. It's not like they're at the tail end of their career.
Yeah, I basically turned down every offer and had the same conversation, I think 3 times now, which is, yes, I know Jake Ferguson isn't that good. No, I'm not going to trade him because our league settings and scoring make him that good. Like, right. Yes, I realize Jake Ferguson is really not exactly a guy that screams like number one option, but
He scores
he
like a wide
scores.
receiver too.
He scores. Yeah, he scores like the 15th wide receiver in the league. Like, okay,
Right.
like I have to value him like that. Then
Yes.
it's
Unless you're getting that kind of return. It's
it
not like
feels so ridiculous to turn down offers for tight ends that like in a normal league, I'd be like, oh my God, this is great value. And I'm like, wait, no, this is not great value because of the way the tight end settings are.
this is why Brock Bowers was the third overall pick
Exactly. Yeah.
in our draft, even though it was one of the deepest rookie classes ever, and he's a tight end. But the chances that just the chance that he could become, you're looking at a guy that could potentially score like a top 10 player in the league based on our scoring format. Anyone with that upside has to go early. It's just so hard to find productive tight ends.
Yeah. We'll see how his rookie years. We talked about it before. Mayer is there, and he had a good year last year. So it could be a two tight end situation. It could be that Bowers gets used not fully at the tight end position and just split out wide some or something. We'll see.
Hopefully they use him creatively as an offensive weapon type piece because he has the talent to do that. And
he was taking jet sweeps in college. So like they can do whatever the hell they want with him. He's explosive enough that they could just do what they feel like doing.
Let's hope that this staff can do that. I have my reservations about the Luke Getsy offensive coordinator, Antonio Pierce head coach. We'll see what happens. But he's got the talent to produce. Yeah. And then the biggest piece of your dynasty value pie on this roster is really your draft capital. I mean, you have potentially the number 1 and number 2 overall picks for 2025 right now in your roster.
Yeah, there's a high likelihood, as we discussed, that Mr. Good News finishes at the bottom of the league. And there's a very high likelihood that I am not far behind him in terms of record.
At least 2 top 4 picks.
Yeah.
Pretty much locked in at this point.
I'm not going to, like last year, I tried to bottom out and I tried to make sure I got into that top 3, which, I did. I ended up at number 3. This year, I'm not going to try to sell off anything and everything. I'm still going to sell off, aging pieces and pieces that I don't believe will hold value going forward. But if I, a couple of guys surprise and I end up with like a lucky year and end up finishing, 5th from the bottom, I'm not going to be super sad about it,
Well, yeah, because you still have the 101 either way. So,
and I do have 3 first-round picks. The other one coming from Criddle. Who Criddle was not a playoff team last year. Obviously, is a much improved team.
Yep,
but
he's not in this bottom 4 group.
He's not in the bottom 4. But there's always the possibility that he gets a little unlucky or isn't quite up to the level.
We've got 8 teams to talk about still. Not all 8 are going to make the playoffs.
Exactly. We were saying it halfway through last year, like all of these teams can't make it, and they all look like they're going to. So somebody's got to fall out. So it's always a possibility that, I'm not saying a high likely possibility, but I could end up with 3 top 6 picks.
Yep. There's upside for this draft capital to look even better than it does currently.
Yeah.
As the number 2 overall ranked, I think there's a good chance that this will end up being the number 1 overall class once these slots are figured out. Yeah, because you've got yours and Mr. Good News second round pick as well. So you're looking at early second round picks, 3 potentially early first round picks.
So I think if we were just ranking 25 capital, I would be number 1. But Mr. Good News has triple picks in every round in 26, and my 26 extra capital consists of 1 extra third round pick. So he has that number 1. I'm not going to approach that number 1 unless I choose to start stripping down even more of my roster, which I'm trying to build up at this point. I'm not trying to strip down. So for 25, I'm sure my rank would be 1, but for overall rank, it's not.
That's fair. This roster is probably 1 more good draft class away from being a playoff team. And you've set yourself up with a lot of extra early picks to potentially pull that off next year.
Yeah.
So this year is just kind of a developmental year. See if the young guys keep producing, see what we get out of some of these highly anticipated rookies, see how the quarterbacks look, and then next year could be the year to make a move.
That's the plan. We'll see how it goes. the good thing about our league is that we have enough flex spots that even if for whatever reason, like look at the draft board next year and it's the best player available is a tight end. We can play so many tight ends that I could use that capital at tight end. If
Yeah,
it's running
there's a
back,
good chance that that you have 4 tight ends in your starting lineup every week this week.
No, there's not a chance. That's a guarantee. Have you seen the running back room, the wide receiver? There's no one else. I'm going to have the tight ends. As long as they make one catch a week, they will be starting. No, that's not a possibility. That's an almost guarantee. So, next year, those first round picks, it's basically best player available and hope for the best.
Yep. You get the flexibility to not have to shoehorn a pick, especially with the quarterbacks. That's really the one spot that if you don't have one, you have to force it.
Yeah.
So with your depth there, now you can just take the best player, whoever it may be.
I'm also kind of hoping that like a couple of quarterbacks maybe emerge in a way that doesn't appear apparent yet, and that I'll be able to trade down a little bit and pick up extra and all that for guys who are looking for quarterbacks next year.
Yep. There'll be teams that need quarterbacks, whether they'll be prospects to match, that's to be seen, but there will be teams that need quarterbacks.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, you might see, Penix and Knicks both flame out this year, and I'll be wanting to take one of those, who knows? All right. So that brings us to the end of that bottom tier, those non-playoff teams.
Right. I don't think we're going to see a lot of wins out of this group, but we've got a lot of hope, a lot of trending in the right direction for this group, which is good. What you don't want is to have teams sitting in the bottom of the standings with no roster and no hope for the future. At least we've got a lot of good young players, a lot of draft capital, a lot of arrows pointing up. Yeah. So it's a good mix to have at the bottom.
It is. So
we don't have any hopeless teams.
No, even Mr. Good News, who, as we said, has basically no players, still has all that draft capital.
Right. Yeah. Still got hope.
Oh, and plenty of it for that capital because he's, he has drafted well in the past. He's traded a lot of his picks, but the picks he's used have not been like, bums.
Yep.
What I would say is you're not going to see very many weeks from myself, from Rug, and from Mike above the league median. But I
think it'll be a lot better than last year.
There will be some. But each of us will probably get like 3. But what I was going to say is all of those teams are threats where if they're playing a legit playoff team and that playoff team has a bad week and those teams have a good week, there is the possibility of a loss for a playoff team. It's not just hey, I'm playing, Rug's team from last year or Mike's team from last year. It's a guaranteed win. It's not that.
No, these are much improved rosters from last year's group. 3 of these 4 teams were the bottom 3 teams last year, and these teams are much better than they were last year. So I think it'll be a much closer kind of middle ground than what we saw last year.
I would imagine so. All right, so that's the show for today. Do you want to tell everyone who we're covering next week, or do you want to leave it up as a mystery?
Ooh, no, teaser. We're gonna surprise that one.
I mean, they can all go look at Dynasty Daddy themselves. It is a possibility.
Hey, things can change.
I mean, things can change, but we have to cover all 12 teams regardless. So even if they change, like even if somehow I jump up a spot, like we're still covering the other team.
Which one of you deserves to be in the next group?
Ooh, that's more exciting.
Which one of you deserves to be in the final 4 group?
Well, I would imagine your team's probably there.
Well, we'll find out. Stay tuned. Cue the outro.